All right, welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody's having good luck getting your helixes updated. Just a reminder, make sure you read the destructions. Don't read the destructions. Read the instructions carefully, do exactly what it says, heed all of the warnings and things like that. And when you run into trouble, get on the Helix Facebook group and ask people for help, because there are people there that know how to solve whatever problems you run into. So let's talk about some DSP updates. I want to give you a disclaimer up front. If the only thing you care about is checking out the percentages and things, just head over to my page. You don't have to watch this video. I'm going to ramble. I'm going to show you some of the things that I find interesting in there. But if you just want the data, click on the link that should be down in the description. I'll also put one of these cards up here in the corner, and you can go straight to the table and look at all the percentages. So let's dig in and just check out a couple of interesting things from the new update. We're going to talk more about the cabs and IRs at the end. So we're going to skip over there and just check out what some of these new things are. Oh yeah, the new Moon amp. This amp is absolutely one of my favorite things about this update. I think it's the big winner. I loved it in the Metallurgy collection. You run the Bighorn Fuzz into this thing, and it's absolutely just an unstoppable monster. But let's check out what its DSP is. So if you've never been to my page before, at my store, it's got the Helix DSP allocations page. You can find it on the menu. Go into the search box here, and we'll just search for the Moon. And we see here's the new Moon amp, the normal channel, the bright channel, and the jump channel. We've got 35%, 35%, 38% for the jump channel. Uses a tiny bit more processing, but overall, 35%, that's pretty normal for amp models. We also got in here the new PV Vitriol based on the PV Invective. I know a lot of people are raging about that amp. I tend to be more of a Rev Gen type of person, and just as a comparison, the old Rev uses about 40% DSP here, but let's take a look at the Vitriol. 50% on this bad boy. Yes, that is a pretty beefy amp. It's not the only amp that's at the that kind of high end of the scale here. If I just sort, this doesn't always sort very well, but it sorts good enough to get the job done. Vitriol is actually the highest DSP amp in the Helix. You see the Plexi jump gets pretty close at 41% and some change, but the PV Vitriol at almost a full 50% is absolutely the beefiest amp model they've added in there. Let's take a look at new effects, Pillars OD. Scroll down here to the pillars. Take a look at the pillars. We got 10%, 11%, somewhere right in that area on the pillars. That's pretty typical, I think, for distortion. If we look at all the distortions here, yeah, we got them sorted by their cost here. Got the Prince of Tone in there, the 10% range. Big muffs are in there. Tube screamers in there. Dark glass, way huge. And the plumes right in that same range. There's another big muff model. Octavia. KWB is in there. The Wrapped is right in that range. So that's a pretty typical cost for the pillars, to have it be at about the 10 or 11% range. No problems there. Take a look at the Vital Distortion. This one actually impressed me a bit, if that makes sense in this context. Take a look at that. The distortion, the amplitude side of the Vital Distortion, 20%, 20%, 21%, right in that range. The magnitude side, the boost, is down here around the 7% range. So 20% on the amplitude side, 7% on the magnitude side. That's quite a spread between those two things. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Don't get too hung up on these numbers. Both of these are great sounding pedals. try them out, see how you like them. They're useful for different things. They fit right in line with a lot of the other distortion pedals that are in the Helix. Here we go. Filter this all out. So if we take a look down here, again, this thing sometimes sorts a little bit goofy, but so you see around the 7% range, that's where we've got a tube screamer in here. The Timmy is in here, Boss SD1, HM2 is down in that range, the treble booster is in that range, the Kinky boost is about 7% as well, so that's pretty normal for the boost side. But 20% on the amplitude side, that's getting up there into the Carvin legacy territory. And it's also up there where the king of tone is. I mentioned it's twice what a prince of tone is because it's two of them married together, right? Or maybe prince of tone is one of these cut in half. Either way, this 20% range, you can see even here with the Clawthorn drive at the 18% sort of area. This is where the Pod Go starts to not be able to support these pedals. So the Pod Go does not have the Clawthorn drive. It uses up too much DSP. The Pod Go does not have the King of Tone. You would use up too much DSP for it. Pod Go also does not have the Carvin Legacy drive, which we see uses up a ton of DSP. So I would predict, and I have no inside knowledge more than anyone else, I would predict that the Pod Go is not going to get the Vital Dist, the amplitude side of the Earthquaker device's life pedal. Hopefully it will get the Vital Boost, but of course Line 6 are the only people that will know, and we will all find out when it is released. So let's take a look at what is next. 4-voice chorus. Nothing too surprising on that one. If we look at chorus pedals here, get right in there. 4-voice chorus, about 5% in mono, 6 to 7% in stereo. So depending how you like to use your chorus, before the amp or after it, or stereo or what, you can see that's pretty in line with other chorus effects and things in this range to be around the 4 or 5% range for mono and 7% range. You see there's only a couple of choruses that go above that, and that's this 70s chorus, which is one of my personal favorites. A lot of super awesome analog chorus character in that one, but you pay a DSP price for that to get that going. And the plastic chorus is also a super lush sounding chorus, but again, you do pay a little bit more DSP for those chorus effects. So 4-voice chorus, totally fine there. Take a look at the Flexo Vibe. This is a Line 6 original. We'll get up here and just search for Vibe. Okay, Flexo Vibe, we see we're at about 3% in mono, 4 to 5% in stereo. So, you know, nothing surprising there. It's right in the range with other similar effects here. So that's totally cool. Okay, this dynamic ambience. This one did actually surprise me, though. Dynamic. So if we take a look at our dynamic reverbs that we have, dynamic hall, dynamic room, dynamic plate, you see those all came in like 20 to 25%. But the new dynamic ambience is coming in here around 13% in mono and 14% in stereo, which you can see all of these others are exactly the same in mono as they are in stereo. And I'm guessing that's because they're internally processing a stereo algorithm and then down mixing it to a mono output for these other models. But here we actually do see a little bit of a difference in DSP allocation between the mono and the stereo. So this is either due to a little bit of calculation error, but I could definitely say that the Helix is allocating a tiny bit less DSP for the mono than it is for the stereo. It's close enough that you should just ignore the difference for any practical purposes. I just found it very interesting that you can squeeze a tiny bit more in there with the mono version versus the stereo. Alrighty, what's next? We got the bass octaver here, based on the OC2 octaver, the Boctaver, if you will. Okay, here we go. Let's take a look at that. And I'm just going to search for octaver here so we can compare it with the other bass octaver that is in here in the legacy category. L for legacy, M for being a mono effect. The new Boctaver, the OC2, uses up about 5% DSP, 11% in stereo. This one, the EBS octabass model in the legacy category, uses 6 to 7% in mono. It does not have a stereo equivalent, but this is my prediction based on my calculations of what it might take if it had a stereo variant. You're probably only going to use this in mono anyway, so no worries about that. But you can see it's right in line here with these. I'm going to guess, based on the fact that this is such low at DSP, that this is not a polyphonic octaver pedal, just because if we look at the poly pitch shift effects, you can see these are all using between 48 to 53%. That's what we get when we have the polyphonic effects. So just assume, based on that, that this is not going to be a polyphonic pitch shifting effect. So use it for your single note lines and things like that. I use the bass octaver on my bass all the time, so I'll definitely be interested to try out the Boctaver on the bass as well and see how that goes. So we have gone through all of the new amps and effects blocks and things like that. Let's take a look now at a little bit of how I do some of these calculations and talk some about the new speaker cab models, which is a very interesting part of the new update. So let's take a look at this preset. We have here the heir apparent, and you see that's in stereo here, and here's an heir apparent in mono. So in mono, there's no icon. In stereo, you see this little icon. So we have heir apparents all over the place here. Let's take a look at what that is. Heir apparent in stereo is 20%. Heir apparent in mono is 10%. We also have harmonic tremolo here, and these are all in mono. See, they don't have that stereo icon on them. So the harmonic tremolo, that is 3 1/3%. So this is going to give you not only some interesting insight into the DSP allocation for the new cabs and IRs, but also some insight into how I calculate these things. So these are 20, these are 10, these are 3 1/3. So we have 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, 90%. So for all these distortion blocks, we're using up 90% of DSP allocations, then 3 1/3, 3 1/3, 3 1/3. So these three modulation blocks together are using up 10% of allocations. So what that means is we should be at approximately 100% DSP allocated with all of these blocks on the screen. And we can see that we are, because when we click on an empty block, everything is grayed out here. And I know you can't see it, but literally this entire list is grayed out. There's no blocks. I can't even add a simple gain block. If we take a look here at the simple gain block, it's about 0.5%. So we have allocated within 0.5% of 100% of this DSP chip here. We're at a perfect 100%. So if I take off one of these, I've now freed up 3 1/3%. And now, of course, I can add things. And one of the things I can now add is one of the new cabs. Now this is interesting because if we take a look at the cabs, speaker cabs, new. So spoiler alert, it's 3 1/3% for a single cab block and double that for a dual cab block. But if we look at the legacy speaker cabs, they were at 10% usage. So we've cut that into 1/3 of what it previously used, which is awesome because previously I could not fit a legacy cab block in here. You can see, you probably can't see because I have my screen zoomed in so you can read it, but I can't change this to a legacy cab block. I can only use the single cab block. I can't change it to a dual cab block. I can't change it to anything. And also, everything is grayed out down here. I cannot even add a simple volume block. That means that we can assume this cab block and this block use the same amount of DSP. That's how we get to that 3 1/3 number. This is how I calculate all this stuff. It's a lot of swapping things in and out and trying to find things that are equivalent to each other. So I mentioned I can't do the dual cab block, but if I get rid of a second one of these modulation blocks, I now can take this and switch it to a dual cab block. And again, I can add nothing else here, not even a simple gain block. So we know that the dual cab block is taking up the amount of 2 of these modulation effects. So this is all great, and I love the fact that the new speaker cabs use so little DSP. I don't know what they did in their processing to get that to happen, but I'm really glad they did it. It's totally awesome. But here's the surprising thing to me. Let me put one of these back in here. The IRs don't follow as nice of a computation or as expected of a computation. So I put 2 of these back in here so I can now put in a single 1024 IR. And we can see the new 1024 IRs, 3 1/3 for a single, 6.67 for a double. Now the 2048 only supports a single. You can't put 2 2048s on the same line. So this is an extrapolated cost based on other calculations. So you can ignore what that is. But one single fits in here, and now I can't even add a simple gain block. If I remove another one of these, I should be able to switch this to a dual, and I can. So now you see I have 2 different IRs loaded here. So that's great. Or I can switch it to a single 2048. And I can now add another one of these back in here. But now I can't even add a simple gain block to this. So this is the thing. I don't know if you're following along and becoming as puzzled as I was when I saw this. This is the thing that surprises me. A single 1024 uses, well, I shouldn't say uses, it allocates, it reserves the same amount of DSP as is reserved or allocated by a 2048, single 2048 IR. And that surprised me that they did that. I don't know if this is a bug in their allocation tables or if they're using the 2048 algorithm to process the 1024s. In other words, they could pad a 1024 IR with another 1024 zeros and treat it like it was a 2048 IR. So that could be what they're doing. Maybe they're padding 1024 IRs out and processing them through the same thing. Or maybe there's a bug in their allocation table because when you process a 2048 IR, you are processing twice as many samples. That takes more cycles. And you're processing them for twice as long, so that takes more cycles. So it should take more CPU power. It should take more DSP cycles to process a 2048 IR than it does a 1024 IR. But they allocate the same amount for both. The other thing that surprises me is if they're allocating the same amount for both and they allow a dual 1024 block, they really should allow a dual 2048 block. If these numbers are all accurate, then it should be feasible to allow a dual 2048. But they don't allow a dual 2048. That's okay. 1024 IRs are fine. Links to this are going to be in the description. It's got the amps, an awesome thing. I use this page myself constantly because it has the model name and the real names on all these things, and that goes for the effects as well as the amps. You can see Trinity Chorus is actually a Ditronics tri-stereo chorus. PV Vitriol is actually the Invective, PV Invective. So it's a great reference to me when I'm tweaking as well, because I might be thinking that I need a specific sound from an analog pedal in the real world, and I can't remember which pedal that is in the Helix. So I can use this all the time to be dual referencing those. But I hope this video was not too long for anybody. If you stuck around here till the end, you're a champ. You get a gold star from my heart. Thank you for being there and digging the work that I do. And I'm still 6 years later, 7 years later maybe, I don't know how long it's been, as excited about the Helix as I have been since I got the thing. I love playing guitar every day through that thing, and it just brings joy to me to be jamming away. And I hope it's bringing joy to the rest of you, and I hope some of my content is bringing joy to you too. So I'm just rambling to say thank you for being out there and showing me some love and support, and it's right back at you. Have a great year, and I will see you when I do another video someday.